Welcome to the Carr and Seguin Show, hosted by Devon Carr and Paul Seguin, where two Michiganders dive into real estate, outdoors, community building, and everything in between.
Yo, yo.
What's going on, man?
Not much. We got episode 56.
Yes, sir.
Halfway to 112 now.
We're getting good.
I'm getting spot on
Yes,
these
sir.
episode numbers, man.
Yeah.
We're cranking. So we are joined today by a very lovely guest
Yeah.
that will have you introduce Devon.
Brian Kozminski. I mean, let's be honest. If you don't know the name Koz and you've been in the fly fishing world for a day, you're missing out. Because everybody knows Koz. I mean, he goes to all the shows. He's around. I mean, he talks to a lot of different people. He's in a lot of different things. So, Koz, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the compliments. You guys aren't bad looking yourselves.
We like to make you feel good.
We're getting amped up for spring. Are you guys ready to hit the rivers?
Yes.
Bring the warm weather.
Warm weather, definitely.
Completely agree.
And we know that you're stuck in a McDonald's with a little ice storm happening up north.
It's the beauty of spring break in northern Michigan, right?
Right.
It was
And it's April
60
1st.
degrees last week, and now it's 9 degrees yesterday morning waking up.
I know,
Jeez
it's
Louise.
crazy. It's crazy.
With a wintry mix, storm, ice, sleet, rain, and then more snow.
Right.
And in 2 days, it's April 1st. So
Yes.
welcome to Michigan.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure in 2 to 3 weeks, it'll be 70 degrees again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be that way next week, right?
Right.
I'm
yeah.
sure it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think today we kind of wanted to talk about conservation. I mean, especially with spring coming, people are going to start getting out there more. I mean, there's been some changes in Michigan that I think people need to be aware of, and maybe we should touch base on. I mean, we all know steelhead season, spring steelhead season is kind of happening right now. And the DNR now has had a bag change limit for people and on a few rivers. So I know we talked about it before the show about kind of thoughts about, it's good, but it could potentially hurt other rivers if you want to kind of touch on how we were talking about that.
You bet. It's if you haven't been aware, the NRC Natural Resources Commission has had meetings last year, and they pushed through a unanimous vote to reduce the bag limit on 4 of our prime steelhead rivers: the PM, the Manistee, the Muskegon, and the 4th, is it the Betsy or St. Joe? Not 100% totally sure. I'd have to look up my facts on that one, or you guys can post that up later. But I watched and listened to, Schmidt and Feenstra and a whole bunch of other guys got in there, and they threw in their 2 cents. And there are less fish, but we've got to admit that there's also a host of other issues, and one of them being this pandemic has introduced a lot more people to our rivers, and we've seen 3 to 4 times as many anglers on any given day. The beginning of this pandemic, they had to shut down Tippy Dam because people weren't abiding by the 6-foot rule, and there were people everywhere. State cops had to shut the place down.
Jeez.
And there were people dragging fish in right at the boat launch while guys were trying to back their boats down. It's like it was pandemonium for sure. But
it's bad when they shut down Tippy.
Exactly. And that's not the place where you'd want to bring your wife and kids to have a beautiful day on the river in the first place. It can get a little bit out of control.
Yeah.
But what else was there to do? A lot of people didn't have work or jobs and go up north and go hit the river. It was spring. This was March 2 years ago, right now when this happened. So
right.
We were right in the middle of prime steelhead season, like you said. And all of a sudden people started to discover that, hey, I could put a sticker on my boat and I could be a guide too. And there were a lot more weekend warriors, and there were a lot more weekend guides going out. And not all of them playing by the same rules.
Right.
Right.
So I completely understand the need for the change, but we also have to look at some other biological factors. The Great Lakes are cyclical, and the rivers are as well because they're all connected, right?
Right.
You've been on the river a number of years. You've seen great years of steelhead. You've seen bummer years of steelhead. I remember growing up in the Grand Rapids area, fishing 6th Street Dam a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
the Rogue up in Rockford in late 80s, early 90s. We had a couple of bang up years where every time you drifted a glow bug or a black stone, you're going to get a nibble and hook into a steely. And about 5 years later, you couldn't buy a bite, you know?
Yeah.
Low water levels, high water levels, and we are coming down finally where the Great Lakes are finally receding. So the 3-year-old fish that we should be seeing back right now, when they were 5-6 inches long, trying to go back into Lake Michigan, they had to go through a gauntlet of walleye, pike, muskie, other trout, big browns, and sometimes they didn't make it to the big lake. If they were fortunate enough to get to the big lake, they found that there was a lack of food sources because of our other invasive species, zebra mussels, quagga mussels. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our big fish, they migrated to the other side of the big lake because there's a large plateau or a shelf over by Wisconsin where there's some phytoplankton and there's a lot more food sources over there. So we lose a lot of our natural reproduction to the other side of the pond. A lot of people like to comment that the DNR doesn't do a good enough job stocking, but you can't, this isn't 1980 anymore. We can't just throw more fish in the river. The river has to do its own natural reproduction.
Right. Yeah.
The river can only sustain so much. I mean, if you have an aquarium, and imagine Lake Michigan is an aquarium, let's call it 20 gallons. You can either have 20 1-inch fish or 10 2-inch fish or 5 4-inch fish or 2 7.5-inch fish, right? You know, the aquarium regulates the ecosystem, how much it can support. So throwing 100,000 fish into the PM or the Manistee, when it, in all likelihood, should have 50 to 60,000 fish.
Right.
It's different.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you're stocking.
You're throwing
bait.
fish to be, you're stocking food fish for the browns, right?
Right.
At least label it that way if you're going to do it.
Here's the other issue, too. A lot of people growing up, I don't recall ever seeing the numbers of mergansers, hooded or common, and cormorants on every boat launch. You know, they're everywhere. And if I talked to a bird hunter and he shot a couple when he was duck hunting and he wasn't telling anybody where, but he opened one up and it had 40 perch in it.
Jeez, oh, Pete.
You know, and imagine you've got 1,000 of these fish or 1,000 of these birds on a section of your river, and they can eat 40 fish in a day, and they prefer trout. And a lot of people don't understand why predators, otters, weasels, raccoons, whatever, ospreys, they like trout because they don't have scales and they don't have spiny fins, so they swallow pretty easy.
Yeah.
You know? It's not like taking a bite on a perch and it sticks up its dorsal fin.
Right.
And you're choking. So
it's more like a piece of spaghetti.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much what it's like for them.
Let's admit it, they're tasty, right?
Right. Yeah.
Tastes dang good.
If I was a cormorant, that would be my first food choice as well.
Well, yeah, for sure. Especially when they're coming down salmon season stuff and buckets.
Yeah, right.
Just trying to swim.
So maybe we had an issue and we could have had better education at the beginning of the pandemic with the DNR, helping people understand our rivers and conservation. I don't know about you, Devon, when you were guiding, but I get clients that show up and they bring a cooler and they're like, I can't wait to bring some fish home. They're like, whoa, pump the brakes, you know?
Yep.
We're not bringing any fish home. He's like, well, I'm the paying client. I get to bring fish home. Like, you got the wrong guy. You should be fishing with charter boat captain Jim or somebody who wants to bring fish home.
I got a couple people like that.
And it's okay. There's no, I think harvesting a fish every once in a while is healthy for the river and the environment. I think some of our river systems need to be evaluated, especially flies only sections that might be stagnant because there's a couple of 24, 28-inch fish in there, and there's not a lot of second or third year class because that big old guy is eating everything before they get to be 8 inches long.
Right.
So I think we need to harvest one or two of those fish to allow more of our fish to reach that 16 to 18 inch
Mm-hmm.
size, which is really what you and I like to catch when we're taking clients out because that's a
Well,
fun
yeah.
fish to catch all day long. I'd rather catch an 18-inch fish. 17,
Yeah.
18 is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. No, I think you're right. I mean, people are just, it's either we're we're not keeping fish or we're keeping all the fish. There's never an in between, and I think you and I kind of sing on the same hymnal there, where it's like it's not bad to take a fish every once in a while. I mean, if you want to take a fish, that's fine. I don't care. I
Absolutely.
personally didn't do it because I didn't want to clean fish after the trip. I did that in Alaska for 3 years. I didn't want to clean another fish after work.
I would totally agree with you on that. We get, the further north you get in Michigan, we also have a different mentality of angler. We call them the sustenance anglers, where they want to fill their freezer, and they may have fish. They'll go out and I ran into somebody on the Boyne River a couple of falls ago, and he's like, "We got 50 salmon yesterday. You should have been here." And he's already got a full cooler, and he's gonna go run them home and come back and do it again in the afternoon. Like, dude. And then he's complaining at the same time how the fishing's not as good as it was 5 years ago. I'm like, you know why?
Yeah.
Because you gotta let a couple of them spawn.
Yeah,
You gotta let 'em
right.
go.
You got to let them grow a little.
Yeah, or at least drop some eggs and
Yeah.
Right.
let the male come by and do his job.
That was one of always the great stories when you talk to a older gentleman and he would tell you all of his stories when he was growing up, all the fish he used to catch and keep, and then in that same breath he'd be like, "Yeah, fishing just not the same as it used to be." It's like, well, I mean, I know I got a few guesses why.
Yeah, they're all in a Ziploc bag in his
Yeah.
chest freezer in the basement or the garage, right?
Right.
And we all did that because look at our grandparents that taught us how to fish, and they saved every rubber band and every cool-up container from World War II. So if I
Right.
told my grandpa I went fishing, he's like, "Show me." I'm like, "I let him go." He's like, "Then you didn't go fishing."
Right.
I'm like, "Gramps, for real, I caught a couple nice steelhead." He's like, "Nope, I need to see them."
Yep.
Like, wow.
That's what
Okay.
my dad would always say when we'd go steelhead fish or something and we'd let a fish go. He goes, "Your grandpa would be rolling over in his grave if he saw you just let that go."
But at the same time, our job as guides and as outdoor recreation enthusiasts, whatever you want to call it, our number one goal is to educate people, and it totally makes sense to them, and it's been used before. But if all of us guides kept or killed every fish that we caught, there wouldn't be any fish to catch next week or next month.
Right.
It's similar to every time you make a basket in basketball, pop the basket or pop the ball.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing for us to do for next year. There's no future, and I'm happy to see that our kids and this next generation is growing up in a very enviro-conscious world where recycling is primary. Even though not all of our plastics and all of our stuff are actually getting to recycling areas and they're just ending up at landfills, I think the intentions are good, but I also think that we thought we were doing the right thing back in the 80s when we went to McDonald's and there was the styrofoam McDLT keeps the hot side hot and the cool side cool.
Right.
What are we doing today that is going to be environmentally taboo in 20 years?
Right.
I think we need to definitely look at both sides of all these equations, and that's why my concern with the steelhead issue, shutting it down to one, the guy that wants to go out and catch 5 or catch 3 and put them in his freezer, he's still going to do it. He's going to find a way. And the unfortunate repercussion or collateral damage with that is nearby rivers, and we're not going to name any nearby rivers because we all know what they are, but those rivers are
Right.
going to get hit harder this year because of the fact that there were restrictions put on the 4 primary rivers.
Right.
And nobody can come to an agreement with the DNR. They don't think the DNR have enough research or studies. They don't have the data to statistically back up how many fish are spawning, how many are reaching maturity, how many are getting back to the big lake, and how many make it back into the rivers. But what we do know is what we see on the rivers at the boat launch. We can count how many people go into the river and how many
Yeah.
people are bringing fish home.
Right.
They want to see more creel surveys and more census data, but that job, that person, they usually get interns in college who are 20 years old, or they get retirees that are in their 60s and 70s. They're not going to the river at 6 a.m. or 5:30
Right,
like you
yeah.
and I are, and they're not going to hang out until 2 or 3 in the morning like you and I are.
Right.
So their data consists of Monday through Friday, 9:30 to 4:30, what fish were caught at that time, and
It's such a
That's-
small data number.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
this much of that pie, right?
Right.
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 I mean,
So I don't know. And the DNR always likes to say that we've got a formula, then we plug in our data and we get a close estimate. It's not a job I wish I had.
No.
And I'm not a biologist, and I love science and I love studies, and I love sitting down talking with people like Ed McCoy and so many other guys, Brian Burrows on the state level from TU, because they're so well versed and educated on all sides of these issues that there isn't one solid answer that's going to fit the bill on all this.
right. Absolutely. And
Right.
I mean, can't please everyone. I mean, obviously.
No.
Never. Nope.
Like you said, I mean, to be in that position, to have to make those decisions, I mean, you're never going to be the one that's liked the most, for sure. But I mean,
Right.
Yeah, because you got to make a decision between data and then also what, anglers, guides are all also calling for and want.
right.
And then it's, you're having to try to make a happy medium decision, but at the end of the day, like you said, it's never going to please everybody.
Right.
You
No,
know?
and here's our number one issue is, and this goes for you and for me, we want to have awesome fishing in this state to drive more people here so that we're busy not only 85 days during the year, we want to be busy 135, close to 200 days, catching quality fish on every one of those trips. So we always say, why can't we be more like Montana, or why can't we be like Wyoming or Utah or, Colorado? They have a completely different mindset than we do in Michigan. And we also have a completely different river system, different habitat, different seasons, different bugs. Everything is different. So besides that, the DNR wants to drive more business here by making the fishing better. They don't want to make the fishing worse,
Right,
because
yeah.
then they're not selling as many licenses.
License, right. Yeah.
Right. But think back to when we were kids, 70s and 80s. Coming up in 3 weeks, we've got the opener trout season, and there were only a handful of rivers that you could fish in the wintertime for trout. It'd be like the Grand River, the Muskegon, and maybe the PM.
Right.
But now there's almost every river in the state has an open section from X Bridge down to Y Bridge. You know what
right.
I mean?
Open season all year.
Open season all year long, so that
Yeah.
we're selling more licenses, and we're encouraging more anglers, more guides, and we're not adding more fish to the
Fish.
system. So we've got more people fishing
Right.
and less fish to fish for.
Right.
Right.
And then you add a pandemic, and now you've got 3 to
Just a-
5 times as many anglers, period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, a double-edged sword, just because,
Mhm.
I mean, you want people to know about the resources, to, I mean, really enjoy them. I mean, just to see that if something happens, that you're going to have people out there to fight for them. But at the same time, you're like, gosh, I wish all these people would go home. I'm trying to get some peace and quiet.
100% absolutely agree. And, in my neck of the woods, our rivers are a lot smaller. They're definitely a lot more intimate. and they're more difficult to catch fish because of the tight quarters. But we only see 2 or 3 boats a day where, you float down the PM, take a lunch break, and you can count 20 boats go by you, right?
Right.
And there's something different between now and 10 years ago. And it's not just that there's more drift boats, there's more boats, period. We've got, Flycraft, the Hooligan, all the inflatables, Smith flies.
Right.
Everybody can go buy a boat. If you got $4,000,
Right. Yeah.
you're in the game, and you
Saddle
can
up.
throw that thing in the back of your pickup truck, right?
Right. It's not where there was just pretty much clacka and
Hides and
We're
yep,
out
and
west. I mean, you had to make a journey out there to get one, or you had to pay to get
Pay
it
to have it
shipped.
shipped.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, now
Exactly.
there's a bunch of them right in the Midwest now that just make it a lot more accessible.
Yep, totally true. So that's another factor that I don't think a lot of people are considering, and it's adding to the stress of the fish
Right.
and the stress of our rivers.
Which I don't know. I mean, I know like the PM, they have the float permits. I don't know if you make it an all year thing instead of just through the summer to help with that, or I mean, there's got to be something.
Right, like
they
if I
can
went
do.
down there and I wanted to float in a canoe or a kayak, I still have to get a day permit from Memorial Day to Labor Day, right?
Yeah.
And that's on the Pine. That's all on the federal, right below Manistee too. And I think that there is discussion on a state level whether that needs to be enacted on more rivers. Would that be beneficial? I don't know. I tell a lot of people that when I'm floating down the Jordan and it's a raft trip for the Jordan Valley Outfitters, 20, 30 years ago, I used to be able to call up the outfitters, and you could do this on the Asavo, call up Penrod's or Borchers or Ray's Canoe and say, hey, where are all the canoes at? Because I want to float a different section of water. These days, everybody has their own personal recreational kayak or whatever, and they've got a buddy with a pickup truck, and the canoe liveries don't know where all the traffic is at.
Right.
So how do you even know where the boats are at on any given river? I think there needs to be some kind of, and nobody's a big fan of more government and having Big
Right.
Brother have more control, but at the same time, I won't do a day trip pretty much the entire month of July because it's nothing but a flotilla.
Right.
And we get a lot of people that are coming here, it's the plastic hatch, right? Or the Hypalon hatch.
Yeah.
How many people I get up here from Tennessee or South Carolina, and they're not really good fly anglers. So they don't want to go out at night. They don't want to go mousing. And they kind of want to see this beautiful part of the country that they're in. So they don't want to do a night trip.
Right.
So I keep telling everybody, October is your best time of the year to be up here. Kids are back in school. The colors are gorgeous.
Heck
Yep.
yeah.
You might be able to have a hopper or an ant hatch if you get that 70-degree day first week in October. It's usually beautiful. Late September can be good.
Mm-hmm.
You lose a lot of the recreational kayak traffic, so
Yep.
it's a win-win.
Right.
You can streamer fish,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. But now, so moving on from kind of the steelhead,
Did we solve the world's issues on steelhead?
I feel like we did. I mean, I'm pretty satisfied. All I heard you say were more government, and more restrictions.
Yeah,
No.
no, not totally. But, we definitely
No.
need to do a 5 to 10 year outlook on this, and whether we did nothing or went to a zero limit, I think that this situation would resolve itself in the next 3 to 5 years because that's what nature does. And
Right.
the rivers will do that. And I think the fly guides want to blame the charter guys. The charter guys want to
Yep.
blame the big lakes or the bait guys. Charter captains don't want to catch steelhead. That's not what they're after. They want salmon, and the salmon
Right.
are on their way down. We're losing the alewife population, and we're not restocking salmon like we did. I would like to see lake trout are doing well, but that's because they're eating gobies and they actually taste good right now. But no charter boat guy wants to go out and catch a 8-pound lake trout because they don't fight. It's like catching a walleye; they just flop
Come
up
up,
to the
right?
boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Boring.
so what's the answer on that? The Great Lakes are definitely something to pay attention to, and endangered not only by the invasive species with the zebras, the quagga mussels, and Asian carp knocking on the door, but now segue into our next issue, the Didymo stuff that we're finding on a lot of our rivers. It's not non-native to Michigan. I think it has existed in a few of our rivers, namely the St. Mary's, and it is very likely that somebody was fishing up there and they just came down to the Manistee and didn't clean their waders, and all of a sudden we have an issue on the Manistee, and it's pretty prevalent. I've seen it everywhere from CCC down to Smithville,
Oh, wow.
which is 66.
So now, for those listening, what are you referring to?
Didymo, the Latin Didymo gymnata, Didymospina gymnata it's also known as rock snot. I was fortunate enough, it's a fungal bloom that very odd, likes low nutrients. So it's weird that it's showing up in the spots that it's showing up at, but it kind of will carpet the bottom of the river. And when you pick it up and grab it, it's like wet wool, and it has that fibrous, soft, wet feeling in your hand, and it clogs up all the interstitial spaces where our stoneflies and mayflies, caddisflies, crayfish, everything that lives on the bottom of the river underneath rocks and in spaces will lose their home. So if they lose their home, what's next? It's a trophic level that will work up its way up the food pyramid, and we will see an impact on our trout species as well. I was fishing with Sam Day and Tyler Witulski from Moth Bear. This was back in November, and Tyler works for the tribe. He is a water quality I'm sorry, Tyler has Moth Bear. Sam Day works for the tribe, and he is a water quality specialist. And we were going down the river, and he said, "Stop the boat, back up. I saw something." And I'm like, "What? Did you snag your fly
Yeah,
again?"
right. Don't lose that
And,
fly.
Exactly. It was, an $8 circus
Yeah.
peanut or whatever, or a silky kitty, whatever, who knows. But he grabbed a stick, pulled the stick up, and he said, "Do you have a Ziploc baggie?" And I took a bag out that had a fly in it, and we put it in there, and he brought it to his lab up in Charlevoix. No, he's up in Harbor Springs, and texted me back 2 days later and said, we have Didymo on the Manistee." And so I've been watching it, and he went down 3 weeks later with the tribe, and they're monitoring everywhere.
Okay.
So we don't know what to do with it besides watch and see what happens. We think that there's a 90% likelihood that if it's in the Manistee, it's probably in the Asable, because there's so many guys that hit one
Interchange.
river and they go to the next. I called Michigan TU's executive director, Brian Burrows, and asked him what he knew about the situation. And he was right in the middle of writing up a long thesis on the New Zealand mud snails, because we've got signage at all of our boat ramps about mud snails and making sure you clean your boats,
Right.
wash your waders with a 10% bleach solution, or soak your boots. And somebody else suggested using 409, and a lady with the Upper Manistee River Association looked at me and said, "Why would I spray 409 on my waders and then go walk in the river? That's going to kill the fish." I said, "Well, you spray it on your counters and you eat off your counters.
Yeah.
I
funny
think
how that
you'll be
works.
safe."
Right.
Right. But the whole purpose of sanitizing something, we're in this generation now of proper hygiene and cleaning everything. And I think that we need to get in the habit of, every time we go to the river, clean our boots. I've got a pair of waders and a pair of boots that I keep at the cottage that are just Manistee. And then I've got a pair of waders and boots that are at home just for the Jordan, so I don't crisscross.
Right.
And, you know, you're probably like me too, where you have more than one pair of waders, and we're fortunate in that aspect that I can let a pair dry out completely before I grab my next pair and go hit the river. And that's the big key. A lot of people were concerned about felt soles and that issue. If you're completely soaking your boots in a 10% solution, or there's it's a veterinarian fungicidal, it's like a horse, it's called Virkon Z or Virkon S. I ordered it from Amazon. You can find it on Walmart's page. There's little tablets, and you can throw them in a 5-gallon bucket of water, or just like a big Lexon. Throw your waders and your boots in there, and I'm keeping them in the boat so that when people come out with me at the end of the day, we can just throw all of our stuff together in a big bucket and throw in a tab. And it's safe for the environment, so we don't have to worry about that. But it's a broad spectrum antifungal cleaner. So that's kind of what we need to get used to. Who knows? Maybe we're seeing more of this because of additional kayakers and canoers and tubers and recreational users.
That's
I mean, the river has seen a lot more people, and there aren't instructions on your kayak when you buy them at Dunham Sports or MC. It says, please clean your stuff. Please tie down your cooler. Please don't wear flip flops or Crocs because you're going to lose them on the first bend of the river. Right? And all of your White Claws as they float down the river.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems to be the new river canoe egg. They're everywhere. So I think
it's true though.
Our biggest goal is educate, inform, try to get people to understand what this is and how it can spread. Talking to a couple of biologists from the state, we might be lucky that a lot of our rivers have. Here's the hard part of the issue is you walk across a river and you kick the stuff up. What does a river naturally do? It's naturally going to flow it downstream and spread like wildfire, right? It's kind of like a fire and there's a good breeze. It's just going to keep spreading. But we also have a lot of spaces in the Manistee and the Asabo where there's long stretches of just sand. So hopefully we have kind of like buffer zones where it's not going to affect or take root and grab on.
Right.
But the same thing is those sandy areas are deserts and they don't have a whole lot of habitat for animals anyway, macroinvertebrates. So we got to sit back and watch and see how this thing plays out. Tyler from Moth Bear, he was saying we need to do something about this. I feel a compelling need to do something to help people understand, get the word out. And I said, well, let's make a t-shirt, kick rock snot or say no to Didymo, some kind of goofy thing. And he has a buddy in Alpena Coffee Roasters, and they're making a coffee brand right now. They've got Midnight Mousing and True North Trout Coffee, Hex, Hazelnut Hex. They got a couple of different brands, and we're donating 2% back to Trout Unlimited. They're going to do a write-up in TU next month. And we're going to use that money for more signage and more boat or wader wash stations at public access sites.
Awesome.
And I think we just need to be those advocates to let everybody know that we need to take care of our rivers or they're not going to be around. We're going to be those old guys that you were talking about earlier saying, damn, you should have been here back in the 90s.
Yeah,
when fishing was good. Back in 99, I caught this 24-incher in here. I haven't seen a fish.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's happening. I already feel I feel it in my bones that we're getting that way.
But no, I mean, I think just like you said, I mean, I feel like the younger generation today are more conscious of the environment. And I mean, yet they might not know about Didymo or like the New Zealand mud snail, but they might enjoy the river and they actually care about it. and just like you said, educating them. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lecture, obviously, or anything like that, but just have some stuff out there. I mean, while they're waiting for their buddy to pick them up or something, just so that they're aware. Say, oh man, I did see that on there, and then
Right.
I'm just like a quick little read kind of thing. I mean, obviously, you don't want to make it a novel, because then, let's be honest, in today's world, I mean, the attention span is so
10 seconds.
minute, it's so small that, I mean, you just want to just get them a little interested. Something maybe they saw on the river, quick blurb,
Absolutely.
and then it's
Totally.
like they go home and start researching it, and then all of a sudden they're going to start finding more and find themselves down a rabbit hole on the internet looking at Dynamo and what it can do, and
Right.
next thing you know, you got somebody else that's
Just as passionate about taking care of it.
and they could just be the canoeer on the weekend that loves to drink White Claw and have a good time, which is great. But just because they're that person doesn't mean they don't care about the environment or what
Right.
they're doing.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think we have, I see in my 8-year-old, she amazes me all the time when we go down the river, how she's a budding scientist. She wants to explore. She wants to go find mushrooms, and she knows more than they pay more attention to what we say and do than we realize. And
Oh, yeah.
they're very in tune to the world and everything that's around us. So I think by us being better advocates for our resources, they are going to do the same for us as
Right.
well.
Right.
That's great.
We also
I mean,
have, you and I, we've got a captive audience in our boat for 8 to 10 hours a day. There's only so many old stories and old jokes that we can go over.
right? Yeah.
There's always that moment while we're either cutting up cheese or apples for lunch and getting everything ready together that we can talk about, hey, you know what this river's going through right now that we need to pay special attention to? Or, did you see that sign at the put in or at the takeout? We need to watch out for this and that, and try to let other people know, because we have a lot of people in this state come in from, name a city, Topeka, Kansas.
Right, yeah.
And they're at a restaurant I used to work at, and I talked to them about Asian carp, and they said, "What's that?" I'm like, "Where are you from? How do you not know about Asian carp?" But if you're not in tune to it, I talked to somebody the other day in Texas, and I said, "Wow, are you by those fires? You guys have like 3 main fires that all connected." Like, no, I didn't hear anything about a fire. I'm like, how come I'm in Michigan and I know about your fires? Whatever. But I try not to get too wrapped up in the weather, but we get up and we have to watch the weather, see what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
When you live here in Michigan, it's the easiest thing to talk about,
Yeah,
the weather, because
right.
it's just ever changing every single day.
Yes.
You kind of want to know what's going on.
Yeah. Right.
It kind of determines what you're going to do this weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it changed so fast.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just got to be prepared.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah.
I mean, the trout camp coffee, I mean, that's great. And I know what you're saying about all the people that you have in your boat. I mean, before I stopped guiding, it was the New Zealand mud snail was the big thing in the PM, and they had the wash stations and they put signs up, and then, I mean, you launched your boat and then you parked your truck, and by the time you got back, people were asking about it. I mean, just having those little signs up there, I mean, can make a difference. And I feel like a lot of people were washing their waders. I know the lodge had wader washes stations. I mean, all the launches did as well. And I mean, it's not like you have to sit there and scrub and do stuff for 30 minutes. I mean, it's just be conscious of it and just a quick wash.
I do a lot of stream monitoring with Tip of the Mitt, so we do the bug surveys and stuff like that. And here's something that we didn't think about: our nets. When we go from site to site to go sampling, we need to sterilize our nets, not just our waders and our boots. And I've got one of those tornado anchors, and everybody's very hesitant on those. Are just going to carry bugs in them and transfer all kinds of invasives. They're metal plates, so it's not a likely host spot for but stuff can get in there, absolutely. But if you're sanitizing and bleaching it, you should be fine. I'd be a little bit more concerned about my anchor rope, because that anchor rope usually goes inside of a line inside the hull of the boat, and it's in a dark
Right.
enclosed spot where it doesn't see a whole lot of sunlight and it doesn't get a chance to dry out. That's a prime location for me if I'm a little itty buddy little
Right, yeah.
diatom that wants to go to another environment. So we need to think about our anchor lines as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but no, I use 409. I had that on all my trips, and I always use that. And my theory was the same. I mean, I use it for my countertops. Why can't I use it for my waders?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is all somehow making a way into the water, anyways.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's all gonna.
Hopefully you're rinsing off. You're rinsing off in between, so it's not a direct. It's not like you're walking into the river and you're spraying it with Windex or
right in the water.
bleach and ammonia. You're doing it a few hundred yards from the water and letting it soak into the.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, 409's not supposed to have any repercussions towards your waders or anything like that. I know that was a big thing of what can you use a lot of repetitively, and it's not gonna. I mean, let's be honest. Some waders are very expensive, and you don't want to obviously burn holes in them with bleach or whatever. And
this is very true. Yes,
409 was the best one that they found with New Zealand mud snails, and was, I mean, highly recommended.
I think Jeremy Geist with Trout Unlimited National has been doing a lot of laboratory testing, and he found that 409 was the best, covered the broadest spectrum of our invasives, and took care of a wider array of hosts.
Okay.
So that is your best
409 it is.
Best solution.
And you can buy big jugs of it on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Or, go right down to Quality Farm and Fleet or Tractor Supply.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
What else is coming down the line in Michigan? We've got the grayling study.
Right.
And there's potential that Michigan could see grayling in the next 5 to 10 years. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
How's that going to happen?
I don't see it. I mean,
you worked up in Alaska too, so you would know how that.
Yeah, I mean that's a cold water fish.
Healthy water.
It is, but they're showing studies that they can tolerate warmer water temperatures than browns and brookies.
Ah.
But
I don't know.
As I float down the Jordan River and I tell people I would drink this water. It's clean. I might get beaver fever. That's the only concern that I have. But is this river as clean as it was 130 years ago? And They look at me like, why? What's the difference? I'm like, well, we've changed the landscape. We've changed the physical, the chemical, almost every possible makeup of the landscape around the river. The river's not the same as it was in 1901.
Right.
I wish I could have seen it back turn of the century in the 1900s with all the old pine stands, but that fish also didn't have a lot of other competitive species like brown trout or steelhead or salmon or Atlantics. So they're sharing. The Jordan has its own natural coho reproduction, and so we've got 5 rivers in northern Michigan that are slated for the potential reintroduction of grayling. The Upper Manistee is primary because it is a Traverse Bay Band of Ottawa Indians that is behind the study, and they've got property on the Manistee, so that's going to be a prime location. The Boardman, the Jordan, the Maple, and I think there's one in the UP, the Otter River. But I'll be honest, I'd love to be able to catch a brook or catch a grayling. When my dad was still alive, him and I thought about going up to Alaska to catch one. That would be a cool memory to have with your father or whoever you fish with, a fishing partner, and to be able to catch a fish in Michigan that has so much fabled history. I don't think we can call it native though, and I think that's where people get hung up on the semantics that
Right.
it's you can't fly halfway around the world, grab an egg, and bring it home and say this is our native species. Nope, ours are gone. They've been gone since 1920, and
Jeez.
so in a way, we're reintroducing another exotic species just as much as the brown trout is. But the brown trout's been it's naturalized, even though it's exotic since 1884, right? The brook trout wasn't in that many rivers in northern Michigan turn of the century either. I think the Jordan River strain was used to populate parts of the Boardman, the Ausable, and maybe the Manistee. So that fish has spread not as much as the rainbow trout. The rainbow is in 48 of the 50 states in Michigan or the US. So it'd be cool to see. I just wish that there's millions of dollars being spent on this project that we could be, and it's all private. I understand it's all donated by different foundations and different organizations, and there's great science and there's a lot of great things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also happening they've got the fish in the DNR hatcheries, and we've got our fish biologists working on it. So it's not 100%, it's taking the place of something else somewhere. Somebody else is doing a job.
Right. Time and money is being spent on it for sure.
Yeah.
And space. Yes.
Yep.
And we had to raise a lot of money so that we could UV sanitize the Odin fish hatchery. A lot of this money, time, and effort could be used to improve the rivers and the habitat that we already have.
Right.
Yeah, on something that could potentially not even be something that's going to work.
Yeah.
Right. Or happen.
It's a very
small,
very
chance.
Contentious. Yes. Huge.
When why can't we spend that time and resources and man hours to actually work on what we do have presently in front of us?
Right.
Not hoping we can bring back grayling that is a long shot just to see if it works. I mean, I think it's just common sense.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, yes.
Yeah.
I
mean,
but
okay, let's
has
not
to
fix
be
the problem in front of us. Let's focus over here. Let that continue to, build up more issues potentially while we're focusing on a wish list of something we would love to have back in our state.
Right, yeah.
Something has to fall out of the equation. You can't just add something into an ecosystem and have everything work out.
Well, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Right, just like you said. I mean, there wasn't steelhead, there wasn't salmon. You're introducing them back into an environment they didn't have in the first place.
Right.
To then hope that they survive and grow and flourish.
Which takes them extremely long time to grow. So,
yes.
I mean, they're food for exceptional
Devon,
period
too,
of time.
you can speak on the Alaska issue. Why does so much life flourish in Alaska? It's because of the millions and millions of metric tons of salmon that go out to the ocean, gobble up a whole bunch of shrimp, bring those omega fatty 3 acid, bring all this protein up the river 2,000 miles. They are the catalyst that physically moves protein and energy up a river into a desolate tundra for eagles, for bears, for osprey, raccoons.
Oh yeah.
And they're dying, decaying bodies, not only feeding the eggs, but those eggs are food feeding those big fatty rainbows and those big grayling that you're catching, right?
Right. I mean, it's just they fuel everything. I mean, in Alaska. And I mean, in terms of that, I mean, since grayling takes so long to grow, it occupies all the rainbow trout and everything else that would potentially eat those baby grayling. I mean, they much rather have a pound of salmon flesh or gobble up the millions of eggs that are floating down the river. A lot easier meal than, say, go try to chase down a small grayling, try to eat it.
free omelets, the protein floating down a river, you can't turn that down. You've got to eat those egg omelets all day long.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I mean, our system, I just don't see how, you don't see our giant brown trout just grabbing a pound of flesh off a dying salmon or a steelhead that floats down in our rivers like you do in Alaska. I mean,
no, I don't think they're forced to either. I mean, if that was the only thing that came into the river and the river was a desolate nutrient system and that was the only thing that they had to feed on, I think they would.
Right, probably. I mean, opportunistic feeders, so they would eat. I mean, they'd eat what they could, but in terms of,
but they're predators too. They just want to chase. They want to chase something down.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right.
I mean, you see it all the time. They just chase it just to chase it. They don't necessarily eat it, but they chase it. Or they just snip at the tail. I mean, they do it all the time. But no, I mean, obviously it would be cool to catch a grayling again. But I'm with you guys. Unless we had a well-oiled machine for everything else, then we could start branching off. But I think we have other issues that we need to focus on.
Didn't we have a pond near Clare, Michigan, where a gentleman had he raised Arctic grayling in a pond to fish the Brookhaven, I think?
Yep.
He also had some pretty big. Did he have Nipigon strain brook trout in there too?
I think he did. Yeah.
I haven't heard much from him in a few years. I wonder if that just.
Yeah,
I think he gave away too many trips to Boy Scout groups, and they fished him out.
Fish it out.
Like you said, they take a long time to grow. It's not a quick. Yeah.
No.
Implement.
Yeah. No. I mean, it takes.
The reason why rainbows became as popular as they did. Have you ever read the book A Purely Synthetic Fish: How the Rainbow Trout Beguiled America by Hans? It's like. I'm going to slaughter it. It's like Hans Stevenson or Hans. It's a great book. You need to pick it up.
I've
read it a few times. It's really easy reading. And he talks about how we brought the rainbow from the McCloud River, California. And rainbow trout are fun. They're a sport fish. They run, they jump. They are very opportunistic feeders. They'll eat anything. So it was an easy sell to put them in many rivers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, whenever we take a hatchery fish and we put it into a river system, it's very similar to college football. Bus pulls up to an old folks home and all the college football players come out and they eat the all-you-can-eat buffet, and there's nothing left at the old folks home to eat because the stock fish just wiped out everything.
Right.
Stocker fish aren't smart enough to know how to handle situations when the river puts them in stress. But they're the only ones left because they're the only ones that ate anything. Mm-hmm. The reason that they think this grayling situation is going to be much more successful than the past attempts, because they've done it in the 70s. They used Kettle Lakes in the Pigeon State Forest area. They're using what's called a remote site incubator, RSIs, and basically picture those big plastic tubs with handles on that you buy and you throw your footballs and basketballs in for your kids.
Yep.
It's something like that with another center, like a 5-gallon bucket inside of it that will have the eggs on a strainer, and it will have PVC tubes going into the big tube so that the fish, when they hatch, will actually be hatching in the water on the riverside, and they can imprint on the water that they're near.
Okay.
But there's also been some studies that it takes 2 generations for a hatchery fish to unlearn hatchery behaviors. What I mean by that is when you grow up in a cement run or a pen and a person walks up and all of a sudden pellets are being thrown at you, you assimilate that shadow as being a food source. And then you take that fish when he's 8 inches long and put him in a river, and a shadow walks up and he thinks it's going to be food, and he comes up to the surface and it's an osprey or an angler. Boom. That fish is taken out of the equation, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
It takes 2 generations for a fish to unlearn hatchery behaviors. So even though we're taking the young grayling and we're imprinting them on the rivers that they need to be in, are they going to unlearn behaviors that they learned while being reared? Because they have a brood stock right now that is in Marquette, I believe, in the UP at one of the other hatcheries. So they're essentially pet fish, and we're going to release their next offspring
into the wild,
into the rivers. So yeah.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that we need to think about on all this stuff. And how many times as mankind we keep trying to fix and remediate Mother Nature. Maybe we need to like take a step back and maybe give a couple rivers a break. Maybe let's not fish this river this year, and next year we won't fish this river, and let's see if Mother Nature can balance things out.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a popular answer. It's not a nobody's going to jump behind it, because then you and I aren't fishing it, and that means somebody's not buying a license. And then when they do open it, you're going to see a whole bunch of people. Yep, right. Exactly. Flood those banks.
Right.
I mean, you got like Arkansas that, I mean, they close their river down, the White River, for a little while for the brown trout spawning. And
correct. And I think that's one of the best protective natural reproduction we need to have. But the other side on that issue is too, when they dump 3 million rainbows in the river system.
Oh yeah.
Right.
They pile it in there
yearly.
And yeah. And they're putting those rainbows in. Those rainbows on average are 12 to 14 inches. Most of our steelhead, we're releasing steelhead right now 7 to 9 inch generally.
3 million 12 to 14 inches.
Yeah,
that's why there's a whole bunch of 30-inch browns.
Yeah. There's always food.
Yes. And that's why when you go down there, you're throwing, Mike Schmidt triple tandem deceivers, Great Lakes deceivers that are 8 inches, 10 inches long, and you got to use an 8 or a 10 weight because that's the only rod that can flip that fly.
Right.
Jeez,
but
Louise.
It's a very cool fishery. It's very unique. Our rivers, I don't think we have enough sustainability to handle that kind of volume.
No.
But they also have a different growing season, and that river is staying 55 degrees all year long because it's bottom draw, as opposed to a lot of our rivers where we don't have that. And we've seen, like last July, most of the month was unfishable because our rivers were at the 70-degree mark.
Right.
Let me just lay this out. I mean, because obviously you guys have done this way more than I have for this. Like, you go back to think about Alaska, Montana, right? Even mentioned like what they're doing in Arkansas. Like, what should be Michigan's focus, right? Like, I mean, obviously they're trying to do grayling. Like, why? Why introduce something new? Like, what would be the perfect world in your guys' opinion of like if we focused hard on this and made Michigan the capital of this? Like, what should that be? Like, if you had the full reins, because I mean, you guys have so much, history and knowledge about this stuff. I'm just like, keeps coming up. Like, so what should we be known for? And then how do we develop that to where we become like that mecca of just how beautiful like an Alaska is or a Montana is? Like, I mean, obviously Michigan, we have so many. I think it's a lovely. I mean, we have so many resources.
Mm-hmm.
And good point. Yep.
4 different seasons we have, right? Like, we do have a ton to offer, but is that maybe the problem that we're just trying to offer so much? That's what I guess what it's coming up in my mind as we're just talking about this. Like, what could we just focus on and become the capital of the world for that?
Devon, you hit on this first.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for that question. I don't have that one in my notes.
Let me take a stab at it, and then you can play off of what I think. I think, Paul, exactly what you just said is the reason why Michigan is a world-class fishery. And Dave Smethers passed away last year. Met him, worked with him on many TU issues because he's from Gaylord up here. One of the best things I ever heard that guy say was, there's plenty of water for everyone to fish, just not all at the same time. I think what makes Michigan great, world class, is the fact that in the same day, I could go catch a smallmouth in Lake Charlevoix. It'd be a 20-inch smallmouth. That evening, I could go catch a drake hatch and catch a 24-inch brown. The next day, I could go to the St. Mary's and catch an Atlantic salmon on a dry fly. And then the next day, I could drive down to Lake St. Clair and catch a 60-inch muskie.
Yeah.
Right.
Michigan has some of the best, well-rounded angling opportunities that you can't do what we can do in Michigan, in Montana or Colorado or Utah or name any other state. I love going down to Florida because it's fun to catch baby tarpon and snook and redfish. They're explosive, they blow up. Everything in saltwater is super fast. But when you're fishing in Michigan, you've got its own unique beauty, opportunity. And when you said, what could we do to make Michigan the best? I find a lot of, I don't know, it's a combination of joy, reflection, solitude, relaxation when it's just me and a small box of flies and I'm on either the Black River in the Pigeon State Forest or the Pigeon or the Upper Jordan, and I'm catching little 8 to 10 inch brook trout. There's nobody else out there. It's absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. All I see are birds and hear bugs, and that's what Michigan is, I think.
Yeah.
But on the same day, I could go out and catch a largemouth bass and fill up a bucket of bluegills and have a fish fry.
Heck
you know,
yeah.
Father's Day. Go out on Father's Day and go catch some bluegills on the beds with spider flies, you know?
Right.
Have a nice
can't
fish
beat
fry.
We have a lot of opportunities. And it's not just a fly fishing thing, it's an everything fishing thing.
Yeah,
True.
absolutely.
That's true.
And I think even now that, I mean, smallmouth fishing's always been big, but for the fly fishing industry, I would say with Schultz and everybody, I mean, it's opened people's eyes to even more, which instead of having to drive 3 hours to go catch a trout, they can go out their backyard now
And the Huron.
on the Huron. And I mean, they can have great success just 10 minutes away from their house.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have to drive an hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be to catch a fish.
Right.
And especially smallmouth. I mean, we all know they've pound for pound. I mean, one of the best ones out there for sure. I mean, they'll double over
Absolutely.
an 8 weight. I mean, like nothing.
Right.
Schultz has completely built that industry, and he's definitely made a mark in that area. But it's also the advancements in our technology, not just fly rods and fly lines. I rep for TFO, and so you got to put out that the rods that we can buy today allow us to go fish for whatever carp. We didn't even touch on carp, but
Right.
holy cow. What an amazing species to chase, and everybody scoffs at it, but you don't laugh until you try it because
Right,
it's not
yeah.
easy,
Yeah.
No.
and it's a
Don't knock it
lot
till
of
you
fun.
don't.
Yeah, and I've got a stand-up paddleboard, and it's inflatable, and I love pumping that thing up and going fishing some of the inlets along Lake Michigan, and it's almost like I'm out in some saltwater flats, but it's freshwater, and it's in Michigan, and I'm
Right.
fishing for tailing carp and smallmouth, and it's where else can you do that?
Right. Yeah.
Nowhere.
No. I mean, there is. I mean, Michigan's a great place. A lot of great things to offer. And I don't know if we've kind of exploded with the amount of people that are now interested in it. And we just don't have necessarily the checks in place to kind of
Manage it.
And
Sustain it.
But hopefully, I mean, I have faith in them that they'll figure it out. And I mean, you have to, ultimately.
True.
I mean, you have to, or you're going to suffer.
There's only solutions, not problems.
Yeah.
Well, and we're all bringing up these questions and bringing up the discussion. It's good to have these discussions. You can't just let one body of government run forward and do what they want to do. We all have to be a part of that discussion to help, make the right decision. It's not just for the guides on the Muskegon River. It's for everybody in the state of Michigan. And I don't know about you, Devon, but when I have a new client coming on the boat, I always try to manage their expectations that we're on the same page, because if they're a first-time angler, you can't guarantee that they're going to catch fish because they might not be able to cast further than the oar.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
they think, how come the fishing sucks in Michigan? Like,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
you
It's not Alaska.
you gotta put. That's it. They're like, well, I fished once before up in Alaska. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's not like that.
You did that backwards. You should have
Yeah.
started here and then went up there, or
Went to
Colorado
the
or
mothership
Montana.
first.
Right.
Yeah, all I had to do was watch this little bobber thing go down the river, and he had 2
right.
flies on there. And whenever it moved, I lift the rod, and there was a fish.
Yeah. I didn't even. I mean, it was unreal.
I like those days too.
Yeah. No, but I think you're right, and I think more people today, at least the vibe I get, is they're more acceptable to different people's methods and points of view instead of just fly versus conventional. I mean, now people do both. So, I mean, everyone's kind of trying to be on the same page. It's not, oh, you're killing all my fish, and anyone who kills fish, I mean, shouldn't be able to fish. You should never be able to do that kind of mentality. I feel like as a society, we're slowly shifting to being more open-minded towards the other angler that you're not necessarily.
Yep. We can't be closed-minded. We need to share the river. We need to share our
Right.
lakes. We need to share everything. You know, I don't get upset when I see a whole bunch of canoes and kayaks, and I always say hi. And
Right.
the guys in my boat are always like, "Wow, you like, yeah, we respect everybody that's on the river because we're representing our part of the state to everybody else that comes here from wherever else."
Right.
And I know on Lake Charlevoix, because of the pandemic, let's say 70% of those houses were not occupied 90% of the year. Now it's the other way around. 90% of those houses are occupied year round because
Right.
they moved up from Indianapolis or Columbus or wherever they used to live, and they made Northern Michigan home.
Mhm.
So we need to be more welcoming, more understanding. Don't be closed-minded, and try to keep that conversation and communication line open so that we can all come to an agreement and try to find the best direction for our state and our resources.
Absolutely. I would agree. And I
Heck
mean,
yeah.
now with everybody working from home, I mean, like you said, they're coming up and they're like, well, I don't have to live in the city anymore. I'm going to go live somewhere beautiful.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Especially like Charlotte.
Exactly.
But no, I mean, we greatly appreciate you coming on and sharing your
Thanks
thoughts,
for having me. This is a
informing people of all the things
roundtable, and I
going
think we need to have more people have these conversations. You know, there is no one size fits all answer for everything because what works for the Jordan River doesn't work for the Muskegon River.
on. Right.
You know, you're looking at a river system. The Jordan's only 26, 27 miles long, doesn't have any dams on it. You look at the PM, there's no dams on it, but it's 110, 120 miles long and
Right.
has some of the best natural reproducing steelhead in the state, right?
Right.
But when we see 5,000 fish in the Jordan, that's a good number. When you guys see 70,000 fish, that's not a good number. You guys want to see
Right.
you want to see better numbers. So we've got to figure out how we can work and manage all of our resources on a better platform, I think.
Yep. I would agree.
I do too.
Boom.
That's right. No, we do appreciate it. It's been a good conversation, and we appreciate you taking the time to come and join us and have a good time talking about all the good stuff that Michigan has to offer, because it is a great state.
Look forward to being out on the river. It's going to be an awesome season. Hopefully we don't miss the Hex Hatch this year like we did last year.
Yeah.
It happened so quick. It was done and over with.
So, I mean, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, whether it to be, I mean, to do a guide trip or just kind of, I mean, obviously you talk to a bunch of different people about all these changes and things that are going on. If someone just wanted to have a conversation with you, I maybe about Dynamo or what kind of you're seeing out there, how would they get a hold of you?
All the usual social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel, or they can email me at flyfishbcause@gmail. TrueNorthTrout.com is my webpage, and it's got contact information on there. We try to keep that updated. And I haven't been writing as much, doing the blog thing, because there's just so many other things happening that
Right. Yeah.
writing is kind of like the last thing. And getting through this pandemic and taking care of all the rep jobs that we need to do, contacting dealers, being in more contacts. I rep for TFO, Norvice, Fishyware, Rainey's Flies, Dagon Apparel. And so I'm trying to get everybody in the state, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, taken care of, because all of a sudden everybody wanted to go fly fishing, or they wanted to go buy a kayak, or they wanted to buy a mountain bike. So it's been a crazy 2 years. And of course, everything that we had coming over was sitting on a boat.
Right. Yeah.
Off Long Beach. Every time somebody would call, ask, "Where's my stuff?" It's on that boat right there.
Yeah. Right.
You can swim to it.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to be a few years before
yeah.
it's going to be a while before we shake out of this. And this is going to really teach everybody how to, I think dealers are realizing that we've got to do pre-seasons, and we also need to use social media. I see a lot of fly shops that don't have these kind of outlets. They're not doing virtual or podcasts or any blogs. So the fly shops that are doing it well. You mentioned Schultz's,
Yep.
Mad River Outfitters, one of the biggest. They knock it out of the park all the time. So, yep, support your local fly shop, please.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All small businesses for sure.
Yep.
Exactly.
But no, thanks again, Kaz. We appreciate it. Taking the time. Drive safe. We know you're stormy weather out there.
Thanks, gentlemen. Have a great one. Good to see you.
Yep,
All
you
right.
too.
Thanks, guys. Well, I'm Paul Seguin with eXp Realty.
I'm Devon Carr with Gold Star Mortgage.
This is the Carr and Seguin Show.
See ya.
See you.
The primary purpose of this podcast series is to inform, entertain, and educate. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast series do not constitute legal or professional advice, opinions, or endorsements of any kind. Gold Star Mortgage Financial Group, NMLS 3446, Equal Housing Lender.